So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Labour's new prison minister, very interesting guy, James Timson, about what he would do around sentencing. The Timson Company are a good company. They do hire former prisoners, I think, as well, in their companies and give them a chance at rehabilitation in society. And he was this man's a very interesting pick to be helping out with prisons. And so let's have a listen to what he had to say to Channel 4's Christian Murphy a few months ago.
We're addicted to sentencing. We're addicted to punishment. So many of the people who are in prison, in my view, shouldn't be there. A lot should, but a lot shouldn't. And they're there for far too long. Far too long. And that's just getting worse and worse. I meet people in prison regularly who are serving sentences longer than they've ever been alive for already. And I just think it's just, this is common sense being ignored.
I think you should specify what crimes. You're talking about violent crimes, non-violent crimes, white-collar crimes. I think that's the thing that should be specified, as in what specific type of crimes do you have an issue with, as in the sentencing for those ones.
Evidence being ignored because there is this sentiment around punish and punish.
How would you change that?
I would just look at the evidence. So let me give you an example in Holland, which I know lots of people like to use the Dutch as an example. They've shut half their prisons. Not because people are less naughty in Holland, it's because they've got a different way of sentencing, which is community sentencing. So people can stay at home, keep their jobs, keep their homes, keep reading their kids' bedtime stories. And it means that they're far less likely to commit crime again.
I mean, it's a cultural thing around punishment.
I think this is more to do with kind of house arrest and that kind of thing. It's quite interesting. But again, I think you got to look at which crimes are being put under house arrest. This is the kind of thing where it is not being very specific around what kind of reforms or which kind of models he's really looking at. What do the Dutch decide is a crime that's punishable by jail and which ones aren't?
Isn't it? That we are kind of stuck in a sort of a Victorian mindset.
Yeah.
In a way, that you've done something wrong, therefore you must pay the price.
Yeah, and a custodial sentence is not always the right thing for people. I mean, in very crude terms, and you'll get people who completely disagree with me on this, we have 85,000 people in prison. It's going to go up to 100,000 pretty soon. A third of them should definitely be there. There's another third in the middle, which probably shouldn't be there, but they need some other kind of state support. A lot of them have got massive mental health issues. They've been in prison, in and out of prison all their lives. And then there's another third, and there's a large proportion of women. Prison is a disaster for them because they're just putting them back in the offending cycle.
And given how many ex-offenders are working for you, and what have you discovered about who goes back to offending? What proportion of those people end up stealing from you?
Very low.
Or from someone else?
Yeah, very, very low. But when I first started, it was higher because I was still working it out. So in crude terms now, we don't recruit men under the age of 25 from prison because they're just not mature enough. And from our experience, they won't stay, and often they'll get back into their old ways. But female offenders from 19, absolutely fine. But if I recruit someone from prison, they're more honest, stay with me longer, and more loyal, and more likely to get promoted. I don't know if you've ever been into a prison, but when you walk around, you need people who've just got that. They get to that point in life where they just want a job and they don't want to disappoint their family again. They've got kids on the way, they've got somewhere to live, family and stuff.
Essentially, they hit rock bottom and they realise they can't keep doing this. Like, they can't keep ending up in prison. They're burning bridges with people. And ultimately, they're kind of, I think maybe they become ashamed of the situation that they found themselves in or that they put themselves in.
How would you go about that sort of cultural change to try and change the way people think about prison?
I think we need a government that's brave. I think we need a government that's prepared to take the politics out of sentencing. And I think we need to have a government that is prepared to accept that we can't afford as a country to build £4 to £6 billion worth of prisons to house more people.
So yeah, this is really interesting. I was just reading, just quickly here, about the Dutch system. They talk about having two aims. Number one, preventing another crime, so essentially rehabilitation, and then focusing on psychiatric suffering and the social problems that come with that. Says Homo Volkert, sorry, butchered that one. Sorry, Netherlands. A forensic psychologist and outreach worker who helps conning. We don't treat people with just depression. It's people with psychotic vulnerability, autism, severe learning difficulties, often in combination with severe personality disorders, addiction, financial problems, no good home or links with family, and often they are traumatized. Nobody would approve of the crimes or violence they've committed, but there's a very sad world behind them. If you want to mend all this, it will take a long time. So, the Netherlands is a country where they've basically they don't have enough prisoners, and so other countries, I think it was Norway, that are using Dutch prisons, because Netherlands don't have enough prisoners to fill up their own prisons, which is wild when you think about it. So I would much rather see a rehabilitation scheme put in place. Kind of Starmer, these comments were put to Starmer, saying he wants to reduce the number of people going to prison through renewed efforts to cut reoffending, and reoffending is the key, cutting that. Prime Minister said too many people found themselves back in jail relatively quickly after being sent there. And the question is, what do you see the kind of punishments the criminal system as? Is it for punishment or rehabilitation or both? I think it should exist for both, and it should really look at what has led the person to commit the actions they've committed. Are they a person who has gone through certain circumstances where had they not gone through those, had they not had a bad few months or years, would they've committed that crime? Or are they just a malicious person who ultimately cannot be rehabilitated by society? These are the kind of questions I think they need to be looked at more. He added that Starmer added that intervening to prevent young people committing knife crime would be an early priority for his new government. I 100% agree with that. He said there would be no overnight solution to prison overcrowding, and we've got too many prisoners, not enough prisons. And I'm hoping that they do put some more money into the system so that the staff. We had a really awful case where a young lady was murdered by a prisoner who should not have been let out, and I'm hoping that there is enough kind of staff there in order to make sure that kind of error doesn't happen again, because that young lady lost her life for no reason whatsoever apart from a clerical error, letting out a very malicious, awful human being that should never have happened. There is a part of this where Labour is asked about this. So Starmer did not offer a view on whether he agreed with the estimates from Timpson, but he added, "We need to be clear about the way in which we use prisons. For so many people who come out of prison, they're back in prison relatively quickly. That's a massive problem." He said he wanted to cut knife crime in particular and cited his plan to set up a network of youth hubs. Again, this is great. Starmer, a former lawyer, added, "I've sat in the back of I don't know how many criminal courts and watched people process through the system on an escalator to go to prison. I've often reflected that many of them could have been taken out of that system earlier if they'd had support." And again, this stuff, all preventative measures are the key for, I think, a successful society. Having preventative measures for people before they commit crimes, having adequate mental health care, things like this. This is so important. My only worry is that it's all talk. My only worry is this here, that that the Labour government aren't going to put the money in. When we look at the current situation now, according to Alex Wickham of Bloomberg, saying Labour are going to need to find another 10 billion to pay for immediate decisions on public sector pay, fuel duty, NHS and prison funding, then another 20 billion in the longer term. Could the Chancellor do a 1-year rollover spending review to budget, given that that money is available, that if Labour took the right measures in order to generate the funds via things like taxation, the money is there, but the thing is they're choosing not to get it. And so what that means is that they might not be able to actually succeed with these good programs of youth hubs and things like that, because they're not going to put the money up to do it. These things have a cost, but ultimately there is a cost to putting people in prison. There is a cost to crime. And so, people really need to weigh that up, because these things are worth investing in. People ultimately are worth investing in, but you can save a lot more people than just sticking them in the prison system where they can be face further radicalization to crime and other things. But my fear is this right here, is the money. It can be big talk and say, look, we believe in prison reform, we believe in psychological help, but all of that comes with a cost. You'd have to pay for psychologists, medical professionals to make diagnoses and things like that. And at the moment, I just don't think Labour will do it. But I'm glad the conversation is shifting. This is good. Having someone like James Timpson there is excellent. Honestly, I think he'll be a great pick. But I think if we were to ask him, what can we do, I think he would cite funding as a necessity in order to push through reforms and help people. This a person off his own back has tried to help former prisoners, which is an incredible feat. Like, for a guy who doesn't have to do this at all, he's giving back to society in spades, and that should be praised. That should be praised ultimately. He seems like a stand-up dude, and so I hope that he does a great job. And this kind of method of putting people in kind of the House of Lords and making them ministers in order to get them into governmental roles where they do have some expertise, I think that if they have genuine expertise in those fields, it's well worth doing. If you're going to give crony kind of peerages in order to get them into the cabinet, then I'm very much against that, like they have done with certain Labour goons. But this one right here, I will give credit for 100%. The only thing is, I want to see more than rhetoric. This is the thing that kind of a lot of the kind of pro Labour people don't get. It's more than just about talk. We want to see action. Action is the key. That's what changes things. Talking doesn't change much. Funding changes things. Policies change things. That's what I want to see. This, a step in the right direction, but it's only one step. I want to see a lot more than that. But this is praiseworthy, I think, in itself. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.